Well, hello everyone. Philosopher Stoner 666 here. Check out my new wife beater. Yeah, it's pretty sweet, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm probably going to entitle this something like The End Part 4, Coronavirus Update. So I guess I want to start off giving a shout out to a couple of channels that I've been following since this coronavirus bullshit started. I might put them in the description box. Not the links to the channels, just the names of the channels, and you can search it in YouTube and find it yourself if you're so inclined. So, a good one is Dr. John Campbell. He's very good. He's sort of middle of the road. Good advice, good information. Another one is Dr. Paul Cotrell, who's he's a bit crazier, but some good advice. Another really good one is called Peak Prosperity. Quite an interesting channel. They also were an economics channel before all of this happened. And his economic analysis of what's going on and what's going on with the stock market and everything is quite interesting. He mentioned, I'm paraphrasing information, basically regurgitating it, but the airlines are crying for a bailout, and he talked about how a lot of them were doing stock buybacks. So they would buy back their own stock, and then what that did is, because they had stock options, is that raised the price of their stock. So then they got bigger bonuses because of it. Again, not doing anything productive, no productive work, and getting rewarded for it. And so if they were to do the right thing, they would sell their stock and take the loss and take the money they get from selling their stock, because stock is like a kind of currency, and use that to, keep the lights on, do whatever. But that's not how it is. So a lot of people are saying, oh, this is a failure of capitalism, and this is a failure of this and that. We don't really live in a capitalist society, not in a very pure sense. It's sort of a mixture of capitalism, a mixture of socialism. What it is, and they argued this on the Peak Prosperity channel, is it's sort of profits are privatized, but risk and losses are socialized. And it's especially socialism for the rich. And as well, what capitalism in a sense is this being able to lend money at interest, basically usury. Although I'm not really saying that word right, usury, but research that I've read before discovering these channels and all this showed that the Islamic Empire was ahead of the Christians and the Jews back, say, 1,000 years ago. But when the West started to take off is when they discovered, oh, hey, you can lend money at interest. And that grew the economy, because then businesses were able to borrow money to start a business, all that kind of thing. And so that's basically lending money using money to make money. And a certain amount of that is needed. Businesses need to be capitalized. They need money. You need credit. All that. It helps the economy work. But too much of it is unproductive, right? Using money to make money doesn't really, it's not productive work. It's not socially productive either. And again, a certain amount of it, you need it. You need credit. You need these things. It makes sense to have them, but it's just all gotten out of control. Like, the debt is so big. And Amendum, as I spoke about in my previous video, talked about basically the nature of the debt economy, and all that, so that when you actually start to pay off the debt, it slows down supply and demand, because you're paying off the debt. So you're consuming less, and then consequently you're producing less. And what works is low debt. That works. You have to, the analogy that I was trying to think of a good analogy, and I came up with one. It's basically like having a mortgage on a house, right? And so you can evaluate different countries, right, have a mortgage, they have a debt, they have a deficit. And so you could look at America, right, good economy, productive workforce, all that sort of stuff. So it can afford such and such a mortgage. Say it's a, you know, $400,000 mortgage on a, $500,000 house. That's what they can afford. But instead, what's going on is that they're living in a McMansion. It's not a modest middle class house. It's a McMansion. It's got, pool, 10 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, 4-car garage. They can't afford it. The mortgage is too big. They can't even make the minimum monthly payment. So the debt problem and the credit problem is just ballooned to such a point where it can't be sustained. And that's the real underlying economic issue here with what's going on with the economy. And it's also what I talked about before. It's the supply chain stuff, the fact that one country is like the world's factory, and then any interruptions to that, it starts to break down the rest of the system. And numerous economists have talked about this for years, as I mentioned before. Gerald Celente, Robert Kiyosaki, the Venus Project, and they have good videos. You can watch like hours of videos on this subject: fiat currency, the petrodollar, the debt-based system. And like I said, the debt's just too big. So some other good YouTube channels that I discovered through this crisis that's going on are Epic Economist. They're really good, very doom and gloomy, but their analysis is, I think, spot on. Going back to what I said before, the guys that I've mentioned, it sort of fits an overall pattern. Then another good channel, the Atlantis Report. They're very good analysis, although I don't like that it's like a robot voice, like a computer generated voice, but solid channel, good analysis, good information. Another good channel, the Dollar GPS. They're good. And now the last 3 channels that I've mentioned tend to be of a more right-wing persuasion, but a more traditional, like basically pointing out that a lot of this problem is the fiat currency. And now I did speak of this in my other video about the gold standard and all that. Like the gold standard didn't really work. People could hoard gold. Anytime new gold was discovered, it impacted the price of the money. Only like in Europe, only the kings had the gold, and they traded the gold amongst themselves. And it wasn't really merit-based. They weren't Nikola Tesla or Leonardo da Vinci or Thomas Edison or the Wright brothers or whatever. It wasn't necessarily a productive way to do things, but it did work in the sense that it kept the money supply. You couldn't spend more than what you had. You couldn't inflate it. You couldn't do too much of this debt thing. So it sort of kept the limit on the excesses of human nature. And so that's the other, it's related to this credit debt problem, is that people don't want to moderate their consumption at all. Like I said, they're living in a house, they can afford maybe like a middle class house. Really, that's all they can afford, but they're living in a McMansion, and it's unsustainable. And so all these economic systems are unsustainable, and we have to go back to doing a sort of a, I'm not a capitalist, I'm not a socialist, I'm not a communist, I'm not a lot of things. I don't like to use those kinds of labels, because these labels are arbitrary, and they're used by, conservative, liberal, all this sort of stuff, and their meanings have changed historically. Like the word conservative means a totally different thing now than it did 50 years ago. It's not an accurate way to describe things. I prefer to be anti-ideological, except for the anti-natalism that I've discussed in my videos. But like I said, it's trying to view things through a more, like I said, anti-ideological lens. So, I forget even what I was talking about, but basically, yeah, we get lost in these words when really we have to start using, very specific terms like concrete terms. Shit, I can't even remember what I'm fucking saying. I'm tired. I'm on antibiotics. Yeah, like like concrete terms like productive work, and self-reliance, and yeah, the channels that I've pointed out and stuff already in this video, the analysis is quite grim. We're basically in the Great Depression again, and will we get out of it? All remains to be seen. It remains to be seen where this virus is going and what's going on. But I had a grandfather that told me stories towards the end of his life about the Great Depression, and they were hard times. Um, they were hard times, and I don't think people are prepared for any kind of hard times. Like I said, it's this artificially sustained culture of debt, and uh, people can't live without their Starbucks coffee and their avocado toast. And it's like back in the Depression, people didn't have any work, so it was self-reliance. The system was broken. The government wasn't going to take care of them. The big business interest and corporations weren't going to take care of people. No one was taking care of people, so you had to take care of yourself. So people would start their own gardens, try to grow as much of their own food as possible, do sewing, do your own cooking, uh, you know, uh, find odd jobs and things to do, to provide for yourself, because, no one was going to take care of you. And we all in this modern era think, oh yeah, stimulus and the government's going to save us, and oh yeah, stimulus and all that stimulus, like it can work for a while, but all it is kicking the can down the road. It's creating all this debt, all this artificial money, all these fake IOUs, when like this crisis has to do with supply chain disruptions. The fact is that for 3-4 weeks now, no production has come out of China, and that for at least a month, eventually the shelves are going to be empty, at least temporarily. It all remains to be seen what's going to happen. But yeah, like fake money doesn't help that. Bailouts don't really save that. So it is once again, it's privatizing profits and then socializing risks and socializing losses and getting the taxpayer to pay for it and the average working person to pay for it. And none of the system is based on any sort of productive work or merit. These people didn't earn their status. These hedge fund managers and these people, who was a hedge fund manager? That guy that everybody was talking about like a couple of months ago, and it sort of died away, that his name was Jeffrey Epstein, the sort of infamous character. There's tons of rabbit holes with that case, but he was basically a pedophile, and he had an island in the Caribbean, Little St. James, where he basically raped children. And he was supposedly a hedge fund manager, although I believe he made most of his money through the human trafficking and stuff that he was involved in. But yeah, our society, like I said, the excesses of human nature we do not moderate our consumption. People are just need machines, and they need it to feel comfortable. So that guy, like as evil as he was, to be comfortable for him, he needed a fucking private island to have sex with people on. Like, how ridiculous. And society and the collective labor of the whole society went into producing yachts for all these rich assholes. And again, these yachts will be enjoyed by like a few people, not everybody else. And states like, Flint, Michigan, they don't even have clean drinking water. Whatever you want to call this system, capitalist or socialist or whatever it is, it's not a meritocracy. I think if things were truly a meritocracy, there wouldn't be very many millionaires or billionaires. I mean, when you think about it, this idea of being a millionaire or a billionaire, it's like saying one farmer produced 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 potatoes on their own, all by themselves. That's not really, that's not really how it works. It takes, It's individual achievement, but as part of a team. It's like the game of baseball, right? Individual achievement when you got the bat and the ball comes at you and you try to hit the home run. But then when you're running out on the field, it's teamwork. So wealth is produced collectively. Like I said, but there's also individual achievement. It isn't, whatever this capitalist system that we have, it isn't what Ayn Rand talked about. Ayn Rand is kind of a bit of a wacko. I don't agree with everything that she had to say, but she was right about a lot of things. And I'm sure she would have agreed. She would have had to be persuaded, though, but I'm sure she would have agreed that, yeah, the people that are running things right now, the global elite, whatever you want to call them, yeah, they're not Nikola Tesla, they're not Thomas Edison, they're not Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo or whatever. They didn't earn their status. And, this world is corrupt. Like you read about all the countless stories. Like there was that Peter Nygaard guy who's a Canadian that recently, like about a month ago, got found out for doing a similar thing to Jeffrey Epstein: sex crimes, rape. He paid prostitutes to shit in his mouth and piss in his mouth. Then there's that case of Harvey Weinstein, who luckily got 23 years in jail. But yeah, all of these elite people are corrupt. We have a world, like I was reading, it's not being talked about very much now because of all this stuff going on with the coronavirus, but Yemen, there's been a war going on in Yemen for a long time, and supposedly 8 million people there are going to starve to death, pretty much. Like it's this close to people starving to death, and all of these wars and all of this injustice and all these corrupt regimes and authoritarian regimes and all these unfunded liabilities that we're not taking care of at all. Nobody has a plan. All these homeless people and disabled people and sick people and all these problems that no one has a solution for. And it's, to keep breeding people and adding people to this mess when we can't take care of the people that are here. What are you doing? Like I was reading about what's going on with the coronavirus in Italy. They're making life and death decisions. Like they're making the decision, do we keep someone that's over 65 or over 60? Do we give them the health care, or do we give the health care to a younger person that's more likely to survive? It's a cold world. Like nature and all of this game that we're playing doesn't care about justice or fairness. There is no justice and fairness in this world. It's a corrupt world. It's corrupt. At its very core, it's corrupt. Evolution is corrupt. The whole civilization is corrupt. And I guess it's nature, although nature doesn't really have a brain, and nature is kind of a meat grinder. It's sort of trying to restore a balance. There's just all this corruption in the world, and you know what? As preposterous as the suffering is going to be, as terrible, as horrible as it's going to be, I say let it all burn. Let it all die. And I don't think this disease, I don't think it is the bubonic plague. I don't think it will be the end of the world. I think some millions of people are going to die. It's going to be like the Spanish flu. That seems to be the consensus. Like I said, it won't be the end of the world, but we're not doing anything else to control our population. And so I guess nature has to take care of it. And maybe it will change things for the better in some ways. It will definitely be the end of globalism. The end of all of this stuff, made in China, made in India. We'll have to go back to regionalism, making our own stuff. But, in a lot of ways, it might fix a lot of problems. People will finally figure out, oh yeah, this fiat currency stuff doesn't work either. This stock market system isn't a rational way to distribute resources or run the economy. All kinds of things. It will wash away all the corruption. It will. There's a quote by Nietzsche where he talks here, would that a storm come and wash away and 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 I'm badly paraphrasing here, but get rid of all the corruption in the tree. And I think, yeah, that's what's needed. Thomas Jefferson once said that the tree of liberty would have to be renewed by the blood of patriots. And it's something sort of like that. It's like, every once in a while a good dust up is needed to, again, separate the parasites from the producers, and always remind us that, yeah, self-reliance is the key. You are on your own. The government won't take care of you. The religious institutions won't take care of you. The big corporations won't take care of you. You are on your own. And, I think it's scary as fuck. It's scary as fuck. I was talking to a natalist today on Facebook, and I forget her comment, what she said exactly, but I said to her, well, it's sort of like all these people that say life is meaningless, and then they say, well, it's your responsibility to figure out, find your own meaning for your life. And it's like, what kind of a burden is that to impose on somebody? It's like, but we don't know what it all means. We can't figure out what's valuable. We don't have the answer for you. You didn't ask to be here. We threw you here against your consent. And now, hey, you figure out what the meaning is. You figure it out. It's up to you. It's a terrible burden. And yeah, it may very well be your responsibility to, and I've gone into it in my other videos. Well, you can kind of figure out, well, it's just a value equation. But yeah, it is sort of your responsibility. It's tough. It's cold. The system we're living in, it's pitiless. There is no fairness. There is no justice. It's not a good thing. I used to be kind of a nihilist. I used to be kind of glib and Nietzschean, and I thought I could outsmart it all and be like an Ubermensch. And no, the system will grind you up and chew you up and spit you out. And it just shows how much societal corruption there really is. It's like that guy, that basketball player, Kobe Bryant, died. And it's the typical fawning over a celebrity death. Oh, how terrible he died. And then, your average person, something like this epidemic happens, and like what's going on in Iran is mass graves. So for the average person, that isn't in status, well, they just get tossed into the mass grave and forgotten. And that's what's going to happen to most of us. Like, we will not be, like, you're just going to get tossed into the ground, and that's going to be it. And what happened was a bunch of pointless suffering in a very cold, uncaring world, for no good reason. All this suffering. I mean, it's terrible. With what's going on with this economic system stuff and this virus, this is terrible. Like, this is a mess. Like, I think that I've said it like a million times, and all the arguments have been made already in many of the other channels that I've discussed already. Yeah. Seriously reflect about this virus and reflect with what's going on in the economy, and realize that, yeah, this is nothing new for the human race. It's always been this way. It's always been chaos and calamity and dysfunction and, plagues and pandemics and, economic turmoil and authoritarian regimes and all this fucking drama and all this fucking bullshit. And there's never been a happily ever after. We never arrive in the good times and just get to stay there. We can never go to a place and just fucking stay there. It's terrible. This is a terrible place. This is a terrible game. I hate it. I get up every day and I absolutely fucking hate it. Hate it with a passion. And I constantly think, well, I'm one of the lucky ones that anytime I want to leave, I can go. And, what I was also thinking related to that is that I may very soon get my wish. Like, if shit hits the fan with this virus, I am immune compromised. I have a lung and sinus condition. If this virus gets me, I'm gone. It's gonna knock me the fuck out. One punch, bam, knocked out. Like that, you know. That's the only reason I'm as worried about it as I am. Otherwise, I wouldn't really give a shit. But yeah, I may very well get my wish. And you know, it'll be sort of, well, I had a good run and goodbye and good riddance, you know. Like, hey, finally, it'll put me out of my own misery. So it is what I've talked about before. You know, it bothers me that there's not very much I can do about any of it. You know, as I mentioned, talking to that breeder, they were not convinced by any of my arguments. Their attitude was quite smug and quite glib, their response. And it sort of is a sort of, well, what's been talked about with this pandemic is, it's called the normalcy bias. You know, people don't want to see all the negatives. They want to pretend, oh yeah, everything's fine, blah, 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 blah. And we're heading to a cliff and we're going to fall off of it and it's really going to suck. And yeah, this, like I said, this is just terrible. This is just a fucking mess. And I would argue, yeah, stop making the mess. Stop adding to the mess. Do the right thing. Just stop it. Just stop it. I think that's enough of a video. I don't know. I was thinking today, before I end it, I wanted to get a 3D camera, although they're really expensive, and do like 3D videos. And I wish when I had been traveling in my early and mid 20s that I had had one. And all the cool places that I visited and have 3D videos of all those places. That would have been cool. But yeah, so there's maybe a few other YouTube channels that I've been watching recently. I'll try to include them in the description box. Just the names, and go check them out. And I guess that's enough of a video. Philosopher Stoner 666 out.